And sometimes we give, the complete opposite impression from what we're trying to communicate. But one of the big issues that really isn't in the book, but it's one we have to try to deal with, is communicating by our dress. There's dress codes in the culture, and usually that term dress code usually means a rule. It's a code of conduct or a code of laws for how we're supposed to dress in certain situations. But really, the code often is a hidden signal, a message. We have codes, Morse codes and different codes that convey a signal or a message to those people who are in the know or knowledgeable of what the code means. So, and sometimes it's not so hidden, like fancy restaurants will post signs that men are required to wear coat and tie. And in the business world, a coat and tie indicates a professional status. We speak of white collar as office workers, blue collar as tradesmen, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, welders, and so forth. White collar pencil pusher, or bean counter, or college educated. Blue collar, work with your hands, with tools, trade school, or apprenticeship of journeyman and so forth is the route to learning your trade. But the dress is used to codify or code different categories and meanings and so forth. Also, dress is spoken of as self-expression, how you express yourself. Styles that we like, whether we're conservative or whether we're flamboyant and wild, to express ourselves. But when we are invited to an event, we are conscious of what's expected. And we'll look on the invitation. What does it say? What are we supposed to wear? Is it business casual or black tie formal? Or is it a costume party? I guess sometimes if, or the Emmys or one of those award things is on and, everybody's supposed to be dressed up really, really nice. And then some of the men, you just, black tie formal. But then some of them will wear kind of crazy things. And I've noticed, kids nowadays when they're going to the prom, they got these tuxedos, but it's not uniform. Black, white shirt, black tie. They're all kinds of different colors, and they've got velvet and satin, and they're expressing themselves. Well, I did that when I went to the prom. I found in the closet my dad's tails, and I could fit into them, so I wore tails to the prom when everybody else was wearing tuxes. So anyway, I was expressing myself to be different and all, but still fit within the category of formal. Anyway, but so often we don't want to be out of touch with everyone else. We want to dress appropriate for the occasion. So, we've got swimming suits for the beach party and formal wear for the state dinner party. But when it comes to church, at church, what is proper attire? And what are we saying in, what is the message? What is the code message that's going out by what we expect? And in one sense, we can intentionally or unintentionally convey a message of who belongs here. What kind of people are we expecting or do we want here? We don't put a sign out that says the dress code, but there are different images that are conveyed that way with our culture. As we look around, we're dressed nicely, and we've got the professional look, coats and ties. You need a tie. But coats, but it conveys a more white-collar, professional kind of look, educated kind of look. Although at the later service and at different times, particularly if you look at the kids' feet when they're coming in for first service, even though they're uniform in the robe, there's some crazy things on their feet that we can see walking by, but it isn't displayed in the choir loft. So a lot of that individual self-expression is taken off there. But we have a more casual attire now in the business world. There's Jeans Fridays, and there's lots of places where folks have just decided you don't have to wear a coat and tie all the time. One of the categories or decision-making parts are you in the back office where you're just working, doing your job, or are you out meeting the public, where how you dress conveys a message about this office and so forth. So anyway, those kinds of things happened. But anyway, when I was thinking about that, I remember when I was in college, I was told by a guy, said, "Tankersley, you've got to be the worst dressed guy on campus." Anybody been labeled such a thing? And actually, you wonder what I was wearing? I was wearing my well-worn Levi's that had, the lighter color worn look. Not because I bought it at the store and somebody put bleach patches in odd spots down the legs, but they're well worn because I worked construction for my dad in the summertime, and they were worn legitimately. And a jean jacket and a T-shirt. Now, I didn't follow pop music, but I was told that, that's the James Dean look. But I didn't know James Dean, so I wasn't trying to look like him. I was just dressing that way because that's how I dressed in high school, and I was going to big lecture classes. The professors didn't know who was who out there and graded us on the test and the papers we turned in, not what we look like sitting out there. So, but what I answered, this guy happened to be a member of one of the better fraternities on campus, and he was dressed all preppy in his khaki slacks and his nice sports shirt. But I was also a member of a fraternity, and I had credentials. I was president of the top fraternity on campus at the University of Kansas, so I wasn't a schlep personally. But what I told him is what I believe. If I dress like you every day, and I have a date with my girlfriend, and I dress like you're dressed right now, there's no difference between class dress and date dress. If I dress like this going to class, and then I dress up for the date, she will know I think she's special, because my dress conveyed I think this is a special occasion, and I dress up for it. But for dating, I wouldn't put on a tuxedo. But to dress above casual, I would have to go too far. So I thought it was perfectly fine to wear what I did so that when I had a date, I could dress up. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was my reasoning. But I think that's kind of the same reasoning we dress up to come to church. By our dress, to dress nicely, we're saying this is important. I'm not going to wear my grubbies and my dirty work clothes unless it's a work day at church, but for worship, it's an occasion that I want to convey honoring God and wanting to be my best and look my best in an attitudinal kind of thing, that's what following God and Christ and coming to worship are about, is trying to be our best. And so dressing up is a way of getting in the right spirit and the right attitude. However, we realize in our culture there are some folks whose life situation makes it such they can't afford a lot of nice clothes. And often there are some, like at Karen's mom's funeral, my oldest son, who's a psychiatrist, a doctor, has a high position, but when he's at work, he puts on a white coat. And for the funeral, he says, I haven't had to dress up at work for a long time. I don't have a new suit. He's had to go get a new a new sports coat because all his other ones he'd grown a little bit. they were a little tight. So anyway, that happens to folks. They're just wherever they're working, how they're working. They just don't necessarily need coat and tie. But our concern for being open and welcoming in this missional renaissance and connecting with folks in the community, this is one area where we struggle and have to deal with the dress issues and the image and the message that sends, and then not be judgmental or critical of folks who may come who don't fit the standard that has been set here over the years of what might be expected. It's an interesting note on that theme at St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Oklahoma City. They decided they wanted to do a contemporary service, felt like that's what they needed to do with the screens and, the drums and whatnot. So they remodeled their big community life building and set it up so they could have a worship service there. And I don't know whether they do it simultaneously with the main service, but Bob Long puts on a robe and he's preaching at the regular service in the sanctuary, and his sermon is beamed in. I don't know whether it's live or if it's taped and played there, but a huge percentage of the people who attend that contemporary service are doctors and lawyers and businessmen who come and dress casually and are at worship and drink their coffee, rather than young people with wild outlandish clothes and stuff. And they say, I have to wear a coat and tie 5 days a week, and on Sunday I'd rather not. I'd rather be able to come casually. So they're the ones who enjoy the contemporary service more for that reason than exactly of what's going on, because they come for the sermon. The rest of it, we can take it or leave it, and so forth. But on the dress issue, that was kind of a shocker, and they're kind of surprised when that ended up with what was happening in their congregation. But McNeil says we need to change the scorecard of how we judge and measure our success and accomplishments, because of the truth, what gets rewarded gets done. And he says the things you get points for are the things you concentrate on. The things you know are the criteria for evaluation are the things on which you put your focus. So traditionally, the evaluation with church life coming down from the conference office is numbers. Those are the numbers. In fact, we had to send in a weekly evangelism report of what our worship attendance and Sunday school attendance and how many new members had we gotten that week. That was the scorecard, and they were getting real intense about that. And after a while, they realized that all the people living in small towns that were dying, and there just weren't any new people out there, and the people they had were either going to the cemetery or moving away. It was very demoralizing to have to report that every week. It was just like a slap in the face. So they quit making us do that. But anyway, it's the numbers. How many bodies are sitting out there in the chairs, and and then how much money is coming in on the offering plate. Well, the result has been a real strong focus on getting people saved or joining the church. And part of the reason, those numbers are easy to measure. I mean, it's real easy to measure those numbers and report those numbers. But so often the energy and attention is on finding and reaching new members, and then little or no time and attention or energy is left for the assimilation, for the growth and development in the faith of those members who have joined and come in. So that the reality, if we track over a period of time, some churches are doing a real good job of bringing people in the front door. What they don't know is they're falling out the back door just about as fast as they're coming in the front door, because nothing's being done on the assimilation and development and growth of those folks. They're just kind of get them in, join them up, and then left to their own. And then there's a nurturing and a caring and a walking with folks that has to be very intentional. And part of it is I was just on that kind of thing when I was senior pastor out at St. Stephen's Church. I was very intentional and would make a visit to the home of everybody who was interested in joining the church. And I would spend time with that family to find out, what are you looking for in a church? I mean, you've got a reason for coming. You're looking for something. And in that discussion, I would find out, how to help them find that something. Because it's different for every individual, every family. And so it's really important to kind of know that, but also then to help that happen. And I had very high retention rate, and I did several other things to facilitate that. But it's really important to take care of that. And so that I should have stopped and written a book, because that's one of the big things that McNeil is saying. We need to really pay attention and to measure. Find ways to measure. But that's the hard part. How do you measure spiritual growth? Yeah, we're trying. That's one of the things that Audra is trying to do. We back in the olden days when we had a parsonage, Muzan and Gail used to invite people to their homes, the new members, and we have a new member orientation, and that worked really well. But then when they got on a housing allowance and got their own house, Gail that's just a lot of work. And this is our home now, and it was the first time in their whole marriage they got to enjoy their own home, and they were kind of relishing that. But when it was the church's parsonage, and partly it was big in order and had a formal area where you could host more people. Their own home doesn't have the space, to facilitate that so well. And then we tried to have it at here, but folks didn't come. I mean, there's no draw to come to a meeting in the parlor, but you get to see Muzan Big's own home. The TV star, is on TV every Sunday, and that was a draw. And a lot of people came. And then the rest of the staff would be there, and we would, get to visit with folks and spend time finding out what were their interests, what were they looking for to find in the church. And so that worked well. And we try real hard to try to get people in Disciple Bible Study, and we're connecting. Audra's doing a good job of getting to know folks and trying to connect each new family with a Sunday school class so that they start building the relationships and finding and this thing that Angie Dale is doing, the tags class, looking for spiritual gifts and graces, and see what you're interested in and experienced in and have a passion for, and how that then connects with ministries in the church. So we're doing a lot of things now working on that. So we haven't. But in years past, we weren't so good at that. And we're realizing more and more how important that is. But it's hard to measure those kinds of things of, is somebody growing? Now, one way we could measure that is if we knew your income and then calculated your annual giving to the church and then calculated what percentage that was and could see that each year you were working on stepping up to tithing. In year 1, you gave 1%. Year 2, 2%. Now you're in year 6, and you're up to 6%. And, next year it'll be 7%, and you're working toward tithing. Well, we could track that. But then that's not public to everybody. That's very confidential. Just the business office folks who track that and send you your reports would know. And they might not even know because they wouldn't be comparing year to year. But anyway, that would be a measurable kind of thing to see some level of growth. But the other things, are you growing in your prayer life? How do you measure that? You spend more time? Or are you learning new prayer disciplines? Have you felt God's presence more? God's nudging? How do you measure that? Was that God or just my conscience? Was that God nudging me to do more, or was that just the tapes from my parents or my Sunday school teacher being, what is it? Or does God work through that? Those are things that it's hard to measure. But we need to be trying to look at some of those things. But anyway, do we change our lifestyles knowingly? And there are other things, being more sensitive about in social justice issues, being more compassionate. In the products do we buy, do we pay attention? Are those things made in sweatshops in third world countries? Do we avoid those, or do we still more interested in, I'm going to get the best deal, I don't care who makes it or what the conditions of the workers are? Or are we becoming more compassionate and starting to care? Anyway, Neil gives some categories for changing the scorecard, and he says looking at our resources and refocusing those resources. And one of the main resources is our people, and that's we've already talked about it. Measuring the number of people who attend worship and Sunday school, the regular church things. And but looking at all of you sitting here as resources for ministry, and then start adding up the number of Boston Avenue United Methodist members that work in Meals on Wheels. Now, somebody reporting from Meals on Wheels said Boston Avenue United Methodist Church members make up the majority of the Tulsa Meals on Wheels workers. Did we know that? Anybody know that? Those are the things we need to pay attention to and celebrate. The gospel is getting through the brain into the heart, or into the ears, into the brain, down to the heart, into the feet and hands and steering wheel, and making a difference. How many more of those kinds of things are happening? How many of our members wear the little pink jackets and volunteer at St. Francis, St. John's, Hillcrest, and wherever? I know there's several. I see them. I run into them when I'm making hospital calls. But how many of our folks are translating their compassion and care for others in that way? And so we need to recognize that and celebrate it and affirm that, our folks are a leaven in society, and we're seeing it happen. And also to help more of those things happen. Last weekend, I don't know if you all caught it on the news, they had a clip in Asbury United Methodist Church. It had a day of service, sort of like the United Way. They all came to church, I think, or lots of them came to church early service, and they had a short service, and everybody put on the same kind of T-shirt, and they went out all over the community. And I was meeting with a pastor over at St. Paul's this week, helping their trustees think about parsonage issues, and she had told me that a group of youth from the Asbury Church had recognized that they're a struggling church, and they wanted to come help. So she had them clean out closets that had years and years of accumulated junk piled up in there, and sort it out and get rid of a lot of it and redirect a lot of it and paint a couple of hallways. And so anyway, those kind of activities made the news. Now, they did their day of service on a Sunday to connect worship service with mission service, and they celebrated it, and they got on the news. So it was a win-win thing for them. Let's see. Another refocusing of our resources would mean not stopping at measuring how many dollars are budgeted and spent on every line item, but to track what those dollars accomplish. Those missional dollars locally, nationally, internationally. What difference, for example, do our camp scholarships make in the life of the young people who receive the camp scholarship? Can we measure that? Well, it's kind of hard to measure it because we don't grade the kids at the end of camp and give them a test, but we do hear testimonies from parents and others of what a difference that made in that child's life to get to go to camp. So without invading privacy, of course, we want to try to measure those kinds of things and personally kind of follow up those things. Another way would be, if you really want to know what difference that makes and follow it up, then as an adult you could volunteer to drive the bus. And so you take the kids down and then you bring them back and you hear all their chatter and all the excitement and find out, what difference did camp make? Or be a camp sponsor and be in the small group and hear some of the things that happen and so forth. A second resource that he goes into would be prayer. He says, so often we're just told to pray, pray more. But he reminds us that prayer is not so much for us to inform God about our problems and needs. He says God knows them, but it's not to bend God's love and attention to our agenda. But the purpose of prayer is to open our hearts and minds to God's indwelling Spirit so that we will see the world through God's eyes. Anybody in early service? That was what David was talking about in his sermon today. If we see the world through God's eyes and let our hearts be filled with God's love and compassion, and our minds engage in solving problems and finding answers to human need, and not just our own, then things happen. That resource gets a shift of focus. I've mentioned this before for Christian folks. We can read, if you read the paper, as you read the paper, read it prayerfully. So often we're reading the paper and looking at all the terrible things and wringing our hands and saying, ain't it awful? Why don't they do something about these problems? But if we read it prayerfully and reflecting on, as we find out more about that various event and situation, pray for the people involved. Pray for the people who are working on that problem. Pray for the people who are hurt by that problem. And be asking ourselves the question, where would God want me if that event over there in Ferguson was happening here in Tulsa? Where would God want me to be involved, to help? McNeil suggests prayer walking. Now, this is a kind of prayer, a lot of people think you can only pray with your eyes closed. And part of the reason is so that you're not distracted by what your eyes are seeing. And you can, just focus on the prayer. But prayer walking is with your eyes open, so you don't fall down and hurt yourself. But prayer walking, he says, you could be as a group, if, for example, a group of folks could go up and walk around the Burroughs neighborhood. We're working to help Burroughs Elementary. We go on a prayer walk around the neighborhood to see what is in that neighborhood, what's going on there, and pray for those situations, the little businesses, the homes, the elderly folks, the kids, the teenagers, and so forth, just to go and have a prayerful spirit and attitude about that place and what's happening. And then if we all did that, then to come back and share what did we see and what did God sensitize in our hearts and our minds by what we saw, and did God put a thought or an idea that maybe we might do something, and do that as a reflection. The other kind of prayer walk he talks is you walk around your neighborhood or walk your dog and so forth, and just do a prayer walk through the neighborhood, and pray for those neighbors. And then in this connecting and reaching out, he suggests if you see a neighbor, you say, "Hi, how you doing?" and kind of stuff, and just say, when I do my walk, I'm making this my prayer time, and I'm praying for folks in the neighborhood that I know are struggling, have any problems. Do you have anything I could pray for when I walk by your house? And it's not, I'm not trying to save you or convert you to my church, but this is what I'm doing, and it could build, some real bonds. You could find out, well, yes, you could pray for my husband. He's dying of cancer. Oh, I didn't know. So, anyway, this is a part of what he's saying. Get the focus from just our own selves within our own walls to what's happening outside the walls of our church, and to let God's love go there through us. So that's a redirecting of resources, the resource of prayer. Another one that's kind of risky. I haven't tried this. I'm going to have to get way out of my comfort zone to try this, but he says do the same thing with the wait staff at your regular restaurant or where you go to eat. Just as you're talking and chattering, and if it's, I think it'd be super risky that any strange place you go to, you start doing this. But if you built a little bit of a relationship with somebody where you eat regularly when you go out, and they're a nice person, you care about them, and just say, in my prayer time, is there anything I could pray for you about? Okay, a lady in her elevator where she lives is real sweet, and when they say goodbye, she says, "Have a blessed day." Wishes her, essentially, God's blessing on you, and she does that for everybody. But that's a caring thought, and with the blessed part, it's a subtle way of pointing to God, who's the source of blessing, rather than just have a nice day or be happy kind of thing. Oh, Dub Ambrose out at the Manor is, yeah. Oh, okay. Bring back your blessings, something that blessed you, and write it down. Okay. Yeah, it's, oh my goodness, you can, it's just simple. Count your blessings, and start writing them down and sharing them. So that's a positive thing. But also, this part is to try to be a blessing to others, a caring, loving presence in their life. Anyway, had a whole bunch of other prayer ideas, but ends up with the prayer feedback to celebrate the positive outcomes from prayer requests. In our, the prayer cards, we get lots and lots and lots and lots of requests for prayer for sad, tragic problem situations, and maybe 1 out of 100 someone reports back and gives a thank you for the prayers and says there was a wonderful outcome or a good outcome. Now, sometimes we don't get that because what people are praying for or ask for prayers for and their request didn't happen. If they were asking God for it, the answer was no. But if one is in a process of prayer, and this happens often, that the answer is no when someone's asking for healing for someone or cure for something, but death comes instead. But the thanksgiving could have been for the care and the support that came because one asked for the prayer, then others knew of the crisis and were attentive. And even though the cure didn't come, but death instead, but the love and support then would be there. And then also often helps the person understand that their loved one was never going to be healthy and strong again, and if they continued to live, it was just going to be more and more suffering and pain. And so really death came as a blessing to take them out of that body of pain and suffering, and if we believe, then took them home to be in a better place with God and all the saints. So, the transition into understanding those things can be a real blessing. The next resource as people, resource leaders that we can provide, he says that churches ought not to think of their pastor going to community meetings as extracurricular, it's on their time, but to see those kinds of things are a vital part of representing the church and a ministry of helping the church be involved in the community. And Boston Avenue has a rich history of this, and this really isn't a problem there. We are allowed that and do that. In fact, one of the reasons you've got a full-time minister of pastoral care who does now all the hospital calls and most of the funerals is because that frees David or the senior minister and other clergy to be available and not have to keep canceling commitments and meetings because they have to go care for a situation. I'm there doing that, and then that frees them. And because of that, you hardly see me at those black tie dinners and things because I may be preparing a funeral service and the next morning and don't have the freedom to get out there and do that. But that's just the way we've kind of balanced responsibilities and duties. And so that kind of becomes a part of that resource of time and calendar that happens. And on that, we did one where we were kind of following his theme. I don't know how many of you were here and active back when I first came. When I first came, we had an 8 o'clock communion service in Rose Chapel. Anybody remember that? Where one of the pastors, one of the associates, would preach a short homily and we'd have communion. You kind of remember that? Yeah, it's been a long time. So I was doing that for my first year or so and taking the rotation. But what was happening, we had two clergy. One would be the preacher and bring the message, and then the other, and it was alternated, and the clergy person there had to be ordained to be able to consecrate the elements. But anyway, would have two, and they would serve. And we had an organist because we would have to have a hymn or two to do that short service. Well, the numbers got down to 3 or 4 or 5 that would come to that. So we would have 3 leaders for 3 or 4 folks who came, and it was the same 3 or 4 folks. And it got to be, and the reason they started it was Muzan didn't want to give up the pulpit time in order to let interns have a preaching occasion. Because some of them, it would be a disaster, for their learning experience and to be out there to all the TV land. So he wanted to create a spot for the interns to have a chance to practice preparing and preaching and have a little audience. And the other part was the Emmaus program. When it was first starting, part of the commitments of going to Emmaus is to make communion an important part of your spiritual life. So we'd have to try to have a communion every Sunday that way. Well, not too many of them wanted to get up that early and come do their communion. Well, anyway, we decided that is not a good deployment of staff time and effort to spend a lot of time preparing a message for 3 or 4. So it was decided, how can we provide communion but not do it that way? So it was decided, well, let's just do it a short communion after our main services, and we'll just rotate folks. Well, I could see right away rotating wasn't going to work because people would forget, oh my gosh, this is my week, oh, I forgot to go, and then you wouldn't have the consistency for the folks. So we have 4 or 5 after, and sometimes 10 after early service. We'll have 5 or 6, sometimes 24 after the 12 or 11 o'clock service. And then we decided prayers for healing and wholeness at that one. And so I volunteered to take that to be consistent so that folks could count on that being there. I do both of them. It must be 20 years I've been doing that. And, when the first Gulf War started, we started praying for soldiers and deployed folks. And we just stopped doing that just this last year because had been doing that all that time. But anyway, on that aspect of calendaring, where are we calendaring and focusing time and energy? There are things that we need to be willing to change. If it's taking too much time and energy and the results or what we're accomplishing isn't happening, we need to redirect and be willing to put that time and energy in another place. And so that's what's going to happen. Well, anyway, for all these 20 years that I've been doing this, Jake Cunningham has been a real active Emmaus person, and he's fulfilled that vow to come to communion every Sunday, and so he's there every Sunday, and he helps with this and really engaged in our prayer ministry. But for all these 20 years, he's been asking me to go to an Emmaus weekend, and so I finally said, okay, it's here next weekend, I will go. Which means I'm going to be involved in that, and I won't be here. So, because we're doing this Emmaus, I asked Bill Crow, because he and David made some short videos of introducing this Renaissance and what their understanding and take on it and hope for us to understand. And I said, you've got 4 of those. Those are 10 to 15 minutes. If you brought the little camera or TV in here and played those for my class so that input could be there and have someone be the monitor to explain any more or take questions and answers and so forth, that would be a good substitute and finish up the month of this focus on this. So, anyway, that's what's supposed to happen next week. So come and be attentive and responsive and have some questions. Now, on You had asked me last week after after the service about the feelings of a lot of folks already are doing things, sort of like I was saying a while ago with Meals on Wheels and at your workplace. And now, did my discussion kind of touch that, or have you got another? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I look at is the sense you're introducing this book. I'd like to have a better sense what he an individual.
Oh yeah. Yeah, McNeil.
And the other thing that
he doesn't really tell a whole lot. There's no biographicals. This was my life journey. Yeah.
I guess I get he gets into should.
Yeah.
That's an absent, and a red flag always goes.
Right. Yeah, I had.
And the audience writing for church leaders.
Yeah.
Leaders just kind of wondering.
Right. Yeah. His audience is that to get pastors and the leaders in the congregation to get this different mindset. But part of the reason for sharing it with everybody else so y'all can understand what we're talking about and where we're going. So yeah.
I'm just hard in, but my method back deeper.
Yeah.
And that's now.
Right. Yeah, I think. No, yeah, he's very weak on that, and we're cognizant of that. He really doesn't talk about, if you're making the shift, how do you nurture and grow your people so that they have the training and sensitivity and awareness that they don't go out there and create more problems than do good. Because there are so many well-intentioned folks who do things wrong. I can remember I did a mission trip with our youth, and we went to, we went Missouri or Kansas, and it was an inner city kind of thing, and we had, to go clean up this neighborhood, and there was this house that was hidden by these bushes that had overgrown. I mean, it was 15 feet wide and 15 feet high, and so we thought, we've got to clean this up. This is so overgrown. So we got in there and we, hacked all that down and loaded it on a truck and hauling it off. And the lady that lived there came out, and she was so angry. We had cut down her bushes. And I tried to explain to her, they're going to come back and they're going to be so much stronger and richer and more beautiful. Just give it a year or two. You know what her answer was? I may not be here in a year or two. I'm going to miss my flowers next spring. Well, we didn't know we had to ask. We were there to do the work, and somebody else had given us the assignment, and they hadn't asked. So that was a real learning experience for me. You got to check with the recipient of your good deed. Is this what you really want or understand? So anyway, we've covered 3 weeks of this, and hopefully learned some new thoughts and ideas. Let's pray. Well, dear God, send us forth with a compassion and a care for others, and learn how to be more prayerful as we look at the world and your children in the world, and be open to your nudging and your guidance for something we might do to make things better for someone else. In Christ's name, amen. Okie dokes. Thank